Chapter 1. Michael and Susan's Enclosure. The zoo was a peaceful place, but also full of life. From every direction, various sounds could be heard, from the laughter of children to the conversations of adults to the calls of animals. The capybara Michael, known among the keepers as the philosopher, lived in a spacious enclosure with a small pond, surrounded by lush greenery. His daily life seemed simple, but for him, it was full of depth. Right next to his enclosure was the territory of the lemur Suzan. Her space was filled with branches, ropes, and trees on which she loved to jump. Suzan was an energetic and curious soul, the complete opposite of the calm Michael. But it was this diversity that made their friendship special. Every day when the zoo filled with people, Michael and Suzan exchanged remarks about their behavior.
Look at that family.
Michael said one afternoon, pointing his nose at a group that was looking at his pond.
The children seem fascinated. Maybe one of them will become a biologist one day.
Maybe, but look at that boy.
Suzan replied, glancing at a small child who was trying to throw a stone into her enclosure.
Not everyone is so kind.
Their conversations were full of reflections on human nature. Michael always tried to see the good in people, even if sometimes he had to squint his eyes to find it. Suzan was more skeptical, with a hint of bitterness in her voice.
Not all people are bad.
Michael said, seeing a young girl feeding ducks under the watchful eye of her parents.
Some really care about us.
They care because we are their entertainment.
Suzan replied.
But does anyone ever wonder what we feel?
Such conversations continued throughout the day until the zoo closed. Chapter 2. Nighttime Conversations. The zoo's closing marked a time for Michael and Suzan to reflect more peacefully. When dusk fell and the last visitors left the grounds, the world became quiet, filled with the soft sounds of the night. Lemurs and capybaras were creatures that appreciated this tranquility.
Michael,
Suzan began one evening when the sky was full of stars.
sometimes I wonder what's beyond these walls. Is the city really as big as the parrot from the aviary said?
Michael lifted his head, looking at the darkness.
Maybe it is. But would we really want to find out? Here, we have everything we need.
You're right, but is that enough?
Suzan jumped onto a branch near the fence, as if trying to see more.
I've always dreamed of seeing the world outside, just once.
Their conversations were full of dreams, but also of fears. Michael loved to analyze the things he saw during the day, and Suzan added her restless energy to these talks. Together, they created a perfect balance, sharing insights about the world of humans and animals. Chapter 3. Suzan's Disappearance. One night, Michael woke up with a strange feeling. Everything was too quiet, too peaceful. He turned his head toward Suzan's enclosure, but he couldn't see his friend. Instead, the enclosure was empty. In the morning, panic spread throughout the zoo. The keepers frantically checked the cameras, searched the grounds, and tried to figure out what had happened. Rumors quickly spread among the animals. Suzan had been kidnapped. The parrots, who had witnessed part of the events, spoke of a mysterious van that appeared on the zoo grounds during the night. Michael was devastated.
I can't just sit here.
He said to himself.
I have to find her.
Chapter 4. The Great Escape. For several hours, Michael closely observed the keeper's behavior and tried to find a way to escape. He knew he had to act carefully because any attempt could end in failure. When night came, he noticed that the gate to his enclosure hadn't been closed properly. His heart raced as he gently pushed the door with his nose. The metal hinge creaked, but the gate gave way. Michael stepped onto the path, nervously looking around. He darted through the empty zoo pathways, staying in the shadows. He passed the keeper's building and headed toward the main gate. There, the biggest challenge awaited him: a massive gate with a lock. Fortunately, Michael discovered that the lock could be moved with his strong snout. After a few minutes of effort, he was outside. Chapter 5. The City and Its Inhabitants. The city was completely different from anything Michael had ever known. The streetlights were blinding, the noise of the cars made his head spin, and the smells were so intense that it was hard to identify them. Michael felt overwhelmed, but he knew he couldn't give up. After a while, he noticed a ginger cat watching him with curiosity.
What are you looking for in this chaos, capybara?
The cat asked, introducing himself as Steve.
I'm looking for my friend Susan. She disappeared from our zoo.
Steve paused thoughtfully.
Maybe I know someone who could help you. Follow me.
That's how Michael met Jackie, a dog who lived near an abandoned factory. Jackie was a street veteran, familiar with every corner of the city. Together, they began the search for Susan. Chapter 6. Clues and Discoveries. For many days, Michael, Steve, and Jackie scoured the city, asking about Susan. Every encounter with new animals brought new clues, though they were often enigmatic or difficult to verify. In the city park, Michael came across a group of squirrels who were watching him from the tree branches. They were quick and wary, but the ginger-haired Steve, known in the park as the rooftop master, quickly gained their trust.
What does the zoo animal want from us?
Asked one of the younger squirrels, crossing her front paws over her chest.
I'm looking for my friend.
Michael replied in a calm but determined tone.
She's a lemur, kidnapped from our zoo.
An older gray squirrel, who seemed to be the leader, stepped closer and looked at Michael carefully.
A lemur, you say? Something like that was seen in a warehouse on the outskirts of the park. People with cages were bringing animals there at night.
Did you see them bring her in?
Steve asked, staring at the old squirrel.
I didn't see her exactly, but a few younger squirrels noticed the van. Apparently, there was a small, jumping creature inside. It could have been your friend.
Michael looked at Jackie and Steve.
It must be her.
The older squirrel dropped down lower, almost at Michael's eye level.
Be careful. That place is heavily guarded by humans. I also heard they have guard dogs there, but we, squirrels, can help. We know every hole, every hidden path.
The plan quickly began to take shape. The younger squirrels were to provide details about the route to the warehouse, while the older squirrel promised to distract the guard dogs by throwing nuts from above at strategic moments.
It won't be easy.
The squirrel warned.
The people who work there are brutal. But if you're really ready to take the risk, we'll do what we can.
Thank you for your help.
Michael said gratefully.
Without you, we wouldn't stand a chance.
That evening, the three friends headed toward the warehouse, following the squirrel's directions. When they arrived, they noticed a tall fence surrounding the building. However, thanks to the detailed maps the squirrels had memorized, they found a hidden hole in the fence that led to the back of the building. There, their greatest adventure began. A real challenge that would determine Susan's fate. Chapter 7. The Rescue. Under the cover of night, the three friends reached the warehouse. The building, although it seemed abandoned, was alive inside. Muffled voices of people, barking guard dogs, and the metallic sounds of machines filled the air. Michael, Steve, and Jackie went over their plan one last time, standing in the shadow of the tall fence.
Steve, you go first and find a way to open the side door,
Jackie said.
Michael and I will wait for the signal.
Steve nodded and gracefully climbed the drain pipe to the roof. He moved like a shadow, quick and silent. From above, he had a perfect view of the warehouse grounds.
I see 2 cages inside. One is locked, the other is empty.
He whispered through the ventilation hole.
But we need to watch out for the dogs. There are 2 of them, guarding the entrance.
What about the people?
Michael asked nervously, glancing toward the warehouse.
There are 3 of them, but they look tired. One just stepped outside for a cigarette.
Steve replied.
This is our chance.
Michael and Jackie quickly moved along the shadows to the side door. Steve, who had already opened it from the roof, signaled with a wave of his paw. The door creaked slightly as the capybara and the dog slipped inside. Inside the warehouse, it was dimly lit, only illuminated by the flickering light of an old bulb.
Susan!
Michael called softly, barely holding back his emotions. A weak voice came from the dark cage.
Michael, here!
Jackie immediately rushed to the cage, trying to cut through the lock with his sharp teeth. It was harder than he had expected, but his determination was unwavering. Meanwhile, Steve patrolled the upper floor of the warehouse, dropping small screws from above to distract the dogs, who had begun to circle, disturbed by the noise.
Hurry, Jackie, the dogs are getting closer.
Steve hissed from the roof. Finally, Jackie managed to bite through the lock, and the cage opened with a snap. Susan, though weakened, stepped out on shaky legs. Michael immediately ran to her and gently supported her.
I knew we'd find you.
He said softly, his voice filled with relief and joy.
It's not over yet.
Steve reminded them.
We need to get out of here before the dogs alert the humans.
The three friends with Susan rushed toward the exit, but the path was more difficult than they had expected. The dogs began barking louder, and more lights flickered on inside the warehouse. One of the men stepped into the hall, holding a flashlight. He saw the open cage and shouted,
They're escaping. Dogs, go after them.
Steve dashed toward the shelves, knocking one over. Boxes full of tools crashed to the ground with a loud bang, blocking the dog's path.
Go! I'll slow them down!
He yelled. Michael and Jackie, supporting Susan, sprinted toward the exit. At the last moment, Steve joined them, leaping off the roof right in front of the door. The dogs and humans were behind them, but they managed to get outside and hide in nearby bushes.
Is everyone all right?
Jackie asked, gasping for breath.
Yes,
Susan replied weakly, but with a smile.
thanks to you.
Steve looked at Michael.
Good job, capybara. But it's not over yet. We need to get out of here.
Together, under the cover of night, they fled from the warehouse grounds. They knew a long road lay ahead, but the most important thing was that Susan was free and safe. Chapter 8. Return to the Zoo. After many adventures, Michael and Susan returned to the zoo, where they were greeted as heroes. The animals gathered around them, each with their own story to tell about their absence. The parrots chirped with excitement, spreading rumors about their heroic rescue, and the monkeys composed improvised songs in their honor.
Michael, what you did is amazing.
Exclaimed the older giraffe, stretching its neck above the crowd.
Not only did you find Susan, but you showed us all how important courage and loyalty are.
The zookeepers were also astonished by their return. The zoo director, looking at the tired but happy Michael and Susan in their enclosures, said,
It's incredible what happened. They came back on their own. I promise that from now on, we will improve the security to make sure such incidents never happen again. We'll probably never catch those scoundrels.
That same day, work began on upgrading the fences and installing additional cameras. All the keepers participated in discussions to ensure that the animals felt not only safe, but also more engaged in zoo life. Meanwhile, life in the zoo returned to normal, though with some changes. Michael and Susan became an inspiration to the other animals, who began to appreciate their place in the zoo once again. Children visiting the zoo listened with delight to stories of Michael's adventures, which the parrots constantly spread, adding details according to their own imagination.
Michael, what now?
Asked Susan, sitting beside him by the pond.
After everything we've been through, I feel like nothing isn't possible.
He replied.
Now we rest.
Michael said with a smile, gazing at the calm surface of the water.
But one thing's for sure, if you ever need help again, I'd do it all over again without hesitation.
The friendship between Michael and Susan grew even stronger. Their adventure reminded everyone that even in the hardest times, courage and loyalty can overcome any obstacles. And the zoo, though still full of everyday sounds and bustle, now seemed more united, not only as a place but as a community of animals and people who truly cared for each other.